I'm gonna great. So yeah, let's just go around, say hello, say something brief about ourselves and Linda. I'm not sure if this came up in any of our email exchanges, but although I live here in Pittsburgh, I work for the Peace USA nationally. I work with 1,001 new worshiping communities as associate for coaching and spiritual formation. Been in Pittsburgh all my life. Started and served a church community here called Hot Metal Bridge Faith Community and was pastor there for like 17 years. But I've been doing this 1,001 work for the last 8 years. And I'm serving as chair of the Alliance for Honor and Repair of Pittsburgh Presbytery right now. So that's me. Carol, I'll invite you to go next.
Okay. Hi, I'm Carol Roth, and I am a retired pastor in Pittsburgh Presbytery. I've been here almost 40 years and spent time with some of these guys today reading through old Presbytery minutes. So I feel like this is a hot tub time machine or something. Uh, Getting a picture of events and things that I took part in that I don't even remember. So this has been this has been a journey.
Thanks, Carol. Go ahead, guys. Anybody jump in.
Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, Peter Gilmore. I'm an elder. Um, I've been in Pittsburgh not nearly as long, 37 years, I guess. And you'll find this odd. This is the furthest west and south I've ever lived, uh, which I suppose says something. I'm a retired union propagandist who's working as a part-time history instructor.
And my name is Alan Holfelder. I'm an elder at a church here in Pittsburgh. I'm a retired architect uh, and just have a passion for social justice and was happy enough to be selected to be on this group and have enjoyed kind of delving into Presbytery matters. I've probably been the least associated with Presbytery here of anybody on our group. So it's been interesting to see.
Thanks. Thanks, Alan. Linda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've lived in the Bay Area for about 40 years. I'm a grandparent. I have a almost 3-year-old granddaughter, and I'm a retired hydrogeologist. So, moving to California was quite something in terms of being in a place that has so little rainfall compared to, Batavia, New York. So hydrogeology and finding of water and managing water in California is quite a thing. And I've been at my church, Montclair Presbyterian Church, for probably, gosh, close to 40 years. I started quite young there, and I've served as an elder there. And yeah, I worked as a staff person to the Presbytery of San Francisco for a couple years, helping to support the race equity audit. And then towards the end, I stepped down for the last 6 months as staff and just became a regular volunteer person on the committee to help us cross the finish line with our report.
Mm-hmm. So you were an actual staff person dedicated to this. Okay. Were
Yeah,
you, curiosity, were you full-time, part-time in that role?
10 hours a week.
Okay. Okay. Great. I'm going to real briefly give you what we've been doing, and then because we really want to hear from you, because just looking at everything that you all have done, it's pretty impressive. I feel a little intimidated by it, but I'm confident in my team and what we've been doing, which we started in January of 2024, gathering, and we're commissioned by Pittsburgh Presbytery to look into the history of Presbytery's relationship with our historically Black churches, which are not it's not a huge number in Pittsburgh Presbytery. There's like 5 or 6 that we've been, looking at. Some no longer exist. And in that examination to, consider where racial injustice or harm or trauma has occurred, and then to offer back to the Presbytery are like you all recommendations on possible repair and reparation. So for the past year, we've done a lot of listening. We've just hosted listening sessions with the churches, with Black members of Pittsburgh Presbytery, continuing that, but now moving into our okay, what now phase, and trying to outline. We've been outlining our broad themes that we've been hearing, and considering how we want to tell the story and things we want to recommend to Pittsburgh Presbytery. So just became familiar with what you all were doing last month when I was in Atlanta leading a retreat for 1,001 leaders, and someone mentioned it to me. And as soon as I got back in Pittsburgh, Ralph, who is our Presbytery staff person, Ralph Lowe, on our justice ministry, sent me links to your work as well. So that's why we're here, because we were like, "Ooh, wow, they're doing some real good stuff." So we'd love to hear a little bit about your process, then kind of, as I sent you in the email, then some of your, what you were discovering, themes, and unpack some of those recommendations for us too.
Great. Boy, I love the focus of your work. I think that says a lot about the clarity of the focus, focusing on the historically Black churches. I mean, I think that, in my never so humble opinion, bodes very well to have that focus. Yeah, I love that. So our process, was over the period of over 2 years, and it took actually 9 months in and of itself to pull the committee together. So in addition to the 2 years, it took 9 months, and we really wanted to have a diverse membership, and it was extremely difficult to do that because I think of historic mistrust and cynicism with the presbytery. This is a very painful process for everyone, and there's particular just challenges for people of color in it, and perils of it. And so, we just had a really hard time recruiting a team. And but we were able to do that. And I think we started out with 14 members. And our presbytery is 15% Asian, 6% African American, 3% Latinx, 3% multiracial. It's probably not a very accurate number, and then 73% white. So whereas the Bay Area is much more diverse than that, our presbytery is predominantly white. And so I do want to just say, before I talk about our process, we had a lot of support going into this. In addition to having a paid support, myself as a coordinator, we had a real staff champion from the Presbytery of San Francisco, Reverend In-Ho Kim. And we also had Crossroads, anti-racism organizing and training. And I don't think we could have done this work without Crossroads, Jessica Vesquez-Torres and Noah Kraus. We also hired two pastors, one actually ordained, one not, but for spiritual support. And so they helped us with resiliency building and spiritual reflection, but also we had to undergo, well, not that we had to, but we did undergo a restorative justice situation because we ran into conflict on our committee. So we had trained people, and that was really important because, again, this work is very hard for everyone, and it's demanding and emotionally draining. And having that spiritual tank filled up by people trained in that was extremely helpful to us. We also just, the leadership of the Presbytery, very supportive, and not only financial support, they gave us a tremendous amount of freedom. They didn't interfere in our work. They didn't say, "Hey, why aren't you finishing this? Why is it taking so long?" We had a lot of freedom, and I think it's easy to kind of miss that part of it. But So the other thing I just wanted to say is leading up to this, our presbytery has had a lot of training offered to its membership. But back even before 2018, we had Crossroads, the presbytery did training. We have a Black pastor, Reverend Kamal Hassan, who's provided a lot of training, particularly for white people. And I do think that tilling the soil, preparing us to receive this report was really important because we had 100% approval. It was a unanimous vote.
Mm. Mm.
And even people who were involved in some of the actions that the presbytery had taken that were particularly harmful, that were identified in our case studies, those people said, I see this. I see what you're talking about. And there was not the defensiveness that you can get in this work. Like, wait, me? I'm
Right.
not racist. What are you talking about? It wasn't like that. It was like, wow, I see what you're saying. I was part of that. I didn't know it then, but now I see what you're saying. We've got to do something about that. So I just wanted to share that with you, that I think there was a lot that went into it ahead of time.
Yeah, that's good to know. And we have Pittsburgh Presbytery has offered Crossroad training over the last couple of years as well. And I think there's been some good groundwork done by some other teams in the Presbytery, an anti-racism team, transformation team. And so I feel we are at least in a good space to receive this. And I will say too, like our team is not, although present company excluded, not all white. We do have two of the Black pastors of the historically of our historic Black churches are on this team, as well as another Black member of Pittsburgh Presbytery. So and so far it's been a rich journey, and I can definitely see like the pain in at times in our Black pastors as we're listening to other stories. But yeah, so those are I think at least we're tracking with you so far on those things.
And the fact that you started with listening, I think in retrospect, I think I can only speak for myself, but I have also heard from other team members that we wish we had done that in the beginning. I think we were so overwhelmed with the scope of what we had, and many of us, myself included, were new to the San Francisco Presbytery. It just took a long time to understand how our presbytery works. But the listening came at the end, and that was very hard on the team because they felt it's very hard to tell stories when they're not your stories. It's very hard to look at history and talk about it knowing that you're not getting the full picture. And that was intimidating to us. And so starting with listening, I think, is really going to be wonderful for what you're doing. And so good for you for doing that. I wish we had. So in terms of our process, we had weekly meetings on Monday morning for the whole time, which is kind of, people were like, wait, what? Monday mornings? It was the only time that could work for most people.
How long were your meetings? Just curiosity. Was it?
We tried to do it in an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, we had longer retreats and things like that, but mostly we tried to do as much as we could within the hour. We worked together as a group, but towards the end, when we got into our tools, our analytical tools, we split into 3 groups, and that accelerated the pace of our work. It was done at a slow pace, I would say, and partly because of the challenge of the work and also just the time and the capacity of individual committee members. I mean, it's very easy for someone like myself who's trained kind of as an engineer to like forge ahead with project management. Here's a deadline. We've got to get this done. And, for people in this presbytery who are already active in their church, they're working, caring for family, and they're doing this, it was a lot to expect that they could. And so I continually had to chill myself out and accept just with grace the process as it unfolded. So it was a long process. So you've seen in our work that we had these different phases. We had training from Crossroads. We spent a fair amount of the time in the beginning just getting to know each other, to build trust, and looking at our history, our polity, and we came up with these agreements about how we would be together. And that ended up being really important because one of our agreements is that if we fall apart, if we make mistakes, we have to come back together again. And how are we going to be accountable to those agreements? I mean, every group has agreements typically when you're in a mixed racial group discussion and you're talking about race and racism, but how are you going to manage it when something breaks down? And that is the hard part about it. You know, the courage to name that something bad has happened or that a harm has experienced, and to say we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna work through this together. So yeah, that was our courageous agreements. So you know, it was hard to shift out of doing the history work because you know we just felt like how can we, you know, the history has been so much written from the perspective of white people and so many hidden stories in there. How could we stop doing our digging and move into analysis? But Crossroads really pushed us into that. And so we did this thing called the continuum, where we looked at ourself on a scale of like, I, I forget how far the scale is, but you pretty much focus on the inner part between like 2 and 5. Where are we in a scale of becoming an anti-racist organization? And we discovered that we're really pretty much a symbolic organization. We're an organization that says all the right things and passes all the right measures, but when it comes right down to it, we do not always act in the way that matches the faith and the values that we espouse. So seeing ourselves as more of a symbolic organization, and how that especially shows up is when you have conflict and you're under stress. You resort back to being kind of like a club organization, which is very harmful, and it has been very harmful in our presbytery to people of color. So we had to kind of look at ourselves in that way. That's the continuum. We did this tool called the matrix, which are looking at where is power wielded within the organization. And Crossroads reminded us that power is a good thing. Power is important. Power is how you get things done. It's the misuse of power that is challenging. And I think, my personal opinion, people of faith, we struggle with power because we only think of the misuse, but power is really important in an organization. But how is an organization misusing their power in a way that is hurting people? And really importantly, how is it benefiting, in particular, white people? And that is a question that Crossroad asked us over and over again. How is what you're doing benefiting white people? And I will say all of us across the board had challenges identifying that because it's something that we don't often see.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the, yeah.
I was going to say that's very interesting because in our presbytery, we're like 98% white and only 2% black. And so that lens is even more coming from a white perspective, even than yours. And so, I think we've discovered, that our white privilege and our white perspective have influenced so many things that we're discovering. And when we talk to the black churches, then you begin to discover how they're seeing it through a different lens and how important that is to understand, that perspective. So it's interesting to hear.
Yeah. And how the people of color have learned to code switch to just thrive and survive in our organizations, right? What have they had to do to rise to power or to gain access to resources? You know, what have they had to give up in the process? So the last thing we did was a survey. And so we wanted to test out the themes that we were finding, and we got a disappointingly low response, which I think also is something that happened in the Twin Cities. We tried to make it very accessible. We had it available in 4 languages, but we got enough to conclude that our findings were, I guess our findings were validated from the survey. So that was another tool that we had to add strength to our findings.
Question for you on that. How big is San Francisco Presbytery? How many churches? And was the survey just sent out to every member of the presbytery?
So we have 67 churches, and we have something like 9,500 members, and we have over a dozen new worshiping communities now. It might be 13, 14 new worshiping communities.
Mhm.
And gosh, we used a variety of ways to get this survey out into the community. We specifically targeted session members, and in the presbytery, we targeted committee chairs and pastors, and we just tried a number of ways to get the word out on it. And yeah, so we got a response of I think 251.
Still sounds pretty good to me.
It's a lot of data to deal with. It was kind of
Yeah,
complex, which I was going to
yeah.
say. One of the things that's helpful if you go that route, I don't know that you'll need to, but it helps to have someone who can crunch the numbers,
Mm,
because it was complicated on Excel to do that with
yeah.
a pivot table.
Would you be
Not
able to,
complicated, but it just took time.
no, I'm sure. Would you be able to share the survey? I'm just curious with,
Yes, I can. Yeah, let me
I
make a
think
note of
I
that.
think we have it, Jeff.
oh, do we?
Yeah, it's part of the stuff that we've been sent.
Oh, did I send you?
Or yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay, never mind. I just
So
gone through
it's
that.
it's in the appendix. Yeah,
Oh, it's
yeah,
in the
yeah,
appendix of the,
yeah,
okay, great, great. Yeah,
yeah.
that was the
It,
big
it,
100-page document. I read
yeah.
the short version for starters.
so even though the document is 100 page, the actual report itself is 17 pages in the
It
English
does,
version.
a
And
big
I'm
one.
very proud of that. And that's something I will say that really helped. We had a couple writers on our team. One person, Reverend Talitha Aho, has written a couple books. And so when we got to the end of this and we were trying to put it together, boy, I mean, it just was really helpful to have a writer, because she could just take it and just do it. So.
We've got a writer on the team too, so fortunately, Peter
Um,
there has done his share of.
y- yeah, so in terms of the themes, oh, and the case studies. So the case studies were interesting. We had a team member, Rick Leong, who is just remarkable human, and he kind of did the case studies on his own. And they were thorough and deep. And we kind of debated whether to include them in the final because, again, we were doing these with just based on the written record of the presbytery, which we know is not the whole story. And so we had some debates about it, and we decided to include them, and they were really helpful. They were really helpful for people to read because we found in our survey that even though we've had some very significantly hard things that have happened in our presbytery, most people don't know about it. And these are people who may have been committee chairs, they may have been serving on session at their church, they may be pastors, and they don't know about it. And so we heard in our final, when we had our final circle at the presbytery meeting, wow, thank you for putting in these case studies. I really see what you're talking about now. So it wasn't something that Crossroads really encouraged us to do necessarily. It was something that Rick Leong just felt like we've got to get these stories out there. He was just very committed, and it was a lot of work, and he just did it on the side on his own.
Okay. Huh.
So case studies are helpful. Let's see, the themes that we unpacked, they're very interrelated, and identifying themes is just a way to kind of have a way into a kind of complicated system, if you will, of that again is often not apparent to the casual observer. So insiders and outsiders was our first theme, and here's the thing, most people responded on our survey that they felt welcome in our presbytery. That's great. They feel welcome. But you look at who shows up as leaders, who has access to funds, who has control of decision making, who is controlling our narrative. This is a very small group. And so some people in general, even though the presbytery is by definition made up of its people, most people do not feel that it's their presbytery. they don't use that language like my presbytery. It's like the presbytery, something outside of. And a pastor in one of our circles that we did gave an example. His English is not his first language, and he said, he felt very welcome in our presbytery, much more so than he had in many other institutions, even here in the Bay Area. He said, however, when he went to go for a leadership position, he did not get it. And he always felt that it was because of his racial identity. And so, and he felt like it's like a narrow definition of what is welcome. So that was one of our theme, which rolls over to control of decision making. How we do our meetings, when we do our meetings, how many meetings we have, how long they are. There's just certain people that can do that and many people who can't. And for our presbytery, just offering, for example, Spanish language translation is something that we don't often do in meetings. And so our Spanish population feels like, yeah, they feel welcome, but they've explained to us that they can all speak English. It's not that. It's just they think in Spanish. And so it's very hard to kind of keep up with what's happening. And so when we did our circle with the Spanish community, we did it in Spanish and we had English translation. And it's the first time they said they've ever seen that. And they were just laughing because, oh, now you have the headphones on. You have to deal with the translation. So, I don't know if you have other languages in your presbytery or not. And this may not be a thing for you.
Not so much. No.
Yeah.
Not at this point. It used to be there'd be like Slovak, German, Croatian, Italian
Yeah.
back in the 1800s, but
Right.
not so much today.
So control of decision making, it was a thing, and rigidity. People just felt like, we have tried some very creative things in our presbytery, but in general, people felt like our presbytery does not inspire creative thinking. That we tend to be very rigid, especially under stress.
Finding, Linda. That's
yeah. The accountability gap kind of goes back to what I said about where we are on the spectrum of the continuum of being a largely symbolic organization. We say all the right things, but if you look at our case studies and you look at how we've made decisions, particularly under stress, we do not live up to the values that we espouse, certainly not Matthew 25. It's humbling. It's a humbling. Jessica invited us to be critical lovers of our organization, and I do feel like we struck a balance because in the end, what people said is, you've reported this without like pointing the finger, and it's something that people could take into their system. And Jessica encouraged us to think of an organization like a nervous system, and if you stress it out too much, it's just going to kind of shut down. So scarcity really comes up a lot for us, even though we have a pretty vast treasure trove in our coffers because of all the churches that left our denomination, because when we had the gay ordination. And so I forget what is the euphemism we used to describe that time, gracious dismissal. That these were very large churches and very affluent. And so that put, $20 million overall into the coffers of the Presbytery of San Francisco. So there's a lot of resources. I don't know what your financial situation is there, but money is not. Yeah. So, but it comes up as scarcity and churches have talked about how they really needed some help and they did not feel they could get it from the presbytery. And, what is the model that we have in our churches where somebody needs help? We all do what we can to help them, bringing them meals, whatever. And people do not have that sense of our presbytery that it is there when they need help. Conflict avoidance was the last one. And interestingly enough, by avoiding conflict at times, it means that it ends up really blowing up. So because we've avoided it and then it comes into a situation that is, and I've seen some of that in meetings, But in general, we tend to sweep some of that conflict under the rug, and who does that benefit and who does that hurt? So, okay, that was a lot.
No, that's great. I think that connects with some themes we're finding, in our work as well. I'm really eager to get to what I find your recommendations are pretty compelling and align with some of our stuff. But before we do that, anybody want to jump in? Any questions for Linda at this point, or about their process or themes that they were learning about?
Well, in reading your report, I found it fascinating that there were certain almost sort of universal kind of experiences that take place no matter where you are. So, we've had some of the Black pastors say that basically the Presbytery, the racism that's reflected in the country at the time is mirrored in the Presbytery. And people may not want to see that, but going back through the minutes, from 1916 to today, you see those attitudes, being reflected in how decisions are made and, how money is dealt with is a big theme. And so it was striking to me to read the similarities. I think there are certain parts of your report that we could probably copy verbatim and they would apply directly to Pittsburgh Presbytery as well. I think the difference is for us is like our interviews and trying to, I think we're going to try to capture the history of the Black churches because it's not been documented in the past, is going to be similar to how your case studies work, that in our discussions of the histories of those churches, we will use that maybe as a way to point out where, Presbytery has fallen short, and, how the Black churches view that versus how Presbytery has just gone on thinking everything's okay. So that'll be, I think, where we find the differences between what you have and what we've discovered so far. But it has been fascinating to read.
Yeah, again, your focus on Black churches, I think, is going to be key to. I wish we'd had a little more focused, but we've also had historic issues with our Asian churches. I mean, devastating issues with our Asian churches too. So, and one in particular in San Francisco. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Linda, for the case study, was it just, did Rick just invite a couple people? Was it like pastors or just members?
He took it all from the written record. So how did he choose those case studies is, I think for people who are familiar with the Presbytery, they kind of rise to the top as some of the most significant ones and the ones that are just really painful. So I think he chose those based on his own recognition of they rise to the top, but he mostly did it just from the written record.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Because we definitely have some people we could maybe do that with an option. Yeah. So can you unpack a little bit of your recommendations? And
Yes. So I will say, since we came towards the end of our report, the Presbytery of San Francisco hired a new executive, a Reverend Laura Heifetz, and she came to us as a dean from Vanderbilt University, and she is a remarkable individual, ordained pastor in PCUSA, and very staunch in her background and her work in anti-racism. And so part of when I attended her kind of welcoming meeting, she said that the work that we had done is part of what attracted her to come to our presbytery. So she is taking this work very seriously. She's in the process right now of hiring a new racial equity manager. What we have found in our presbytery is if we don't have some specific people working on this, it languishes. So we have had to kind of do that. so this is a new person who's going to be hired, and they're going to put together a whole new committee that will oversee the implementation. So, because we did not feel that we heard the stories like what you are doing right now, that's our first step, right? Is to hold more listening sessions. I'm just trying to find the part in the report with the recommendations now. Hold on.
Mhm.
Right. So this reparations, approaching reparations, we felt like we weren't ready to do that yet because we haven't named all the harms. So what are we repairing, and how can we ensure that this won't continue to happen, which is part of reparations, right? It's not only identifying, you have to make sure you have the conditions that they won't continue to be perpetrated. So we decided to establish a reparation and healing committee because we do need healing work in our presbytery. And we tried to formalize it by naming, how many people should be on it, exactly what they should be doing, and how they should approach their work. So, I think in the end, we were a little disappointed that our committee didn't do this, like it seemed like, gee, isn't this what we were supposed to do? So there was some lamenting at the end about that, but we just had to accept that was the situation. So we, in typical Presbyterian fashion, we recommended creating another committee. Okay, so and then we recognize in our work that a lot of the problems that we have, and a lot of the I don't know if I like the word microaggression anymore because it's pretty macro, is happening in committees. So committees need to do more work on embracing the precepts of anti-racism. So that's a big part of what we've recommended within the committees. And then ultimately, we are seeing a truth and reconciliation process in another year. So where we would name the harms and articulate the advantages to white people and confess those, lament them, and figure out how we were going to repair that. So that's coming up.
Mhm. And
The last thing.
that team that you're forming is so that they are the ones to carry out this work, these recommendations.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And the living history, again, our history has been not just expansive to all experiences, and it needs to be. And so we wanted to create a living history at the very end, our fourth recommendation. Because it was a lot of work to try to figure all these things out. It should just be in writing, and people should be able to have access to it. And if we're concerned that people don't know, well, we have to tell them, and we have to make it easy and accessible for them to find these stories out. They shouldn't have to be folklore, an oral tradition.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely like that resonates highly with what we've been discovering, especially because our presbytery has made different efforts such as this in the past and have had these conversations with the churches before. So when we show up, there's some eye rolling and some like, haven't we told you all this? How many times do we have to tell this? So that's been one of our kind of like objectives is like, oh, we've got to tell the story well in a way that people will understand it, hear it, have access to it from here on out.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds great. What's your timeline?
Well, they gave us 2 years. We've only been meeting once a month with occasional in person for like 75 minutes. So I'm almost relieved to hear you're meeting weekly because that helps with the amount of wonderful work that you have done. So we're on a like the presbytery is kind of like they're very supportive. We just got a new executive presbyter as well. She's very supportive. Ralph is our presbytery liaison. So I think we'll be able to take the time we need But we were given a 2-year kind of mandate. So by like January of next year to have something potentially to present. So yeah, but it feels like it's going to take a bit longer than that.
Yeah, it certainly took us longer, and we right when we started, there was a pretty significant conflict with strong racial overtones amongst our staff at our presbytery, all of whom were people of color, and that was and three of the people on the staff were part of our committee. That was very hard. The whole thing almost fell apart.
Wow.
And Jessica encouraged me as a kind of a staff person and on the T-Care team to remain neutral and to not get in and on it, which was very wise, sage advice. And she said, this is something that happens in a symbolic organization. It's not necessarily about having people of color in your organization. You know, we had all people of color in leadership role, and we still had the strongholds of white supremacy culture. And you know, it was very hard. And so, but we got through that and moved on. But you know, staying focused was really challenging. There were many distractions along the way, and we just really tried to stick to our knitting as best we could.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you bring any outside speakers in or read any things together in terms of sort of fostering sort of a sort of common ground amongst everybody on your committee?
That's a great question. We did not do that. We had, you know, the Presbytery was offering courses at the time that some of us were taking in addition, but it wasn't specifically part of our work. That's a really cool idea, though. I love that idea. I think our spiritual direction was maybe a glue that held us together, but we weren't really reading anything. Yeah. We did. I mean, I brought in the Presbytery of the Twin Cities. They were, you know, a couple years ahead of us, and then there are a couple other reports out there that maybe I don't know if you've seen. The Quakers have been doing work along this. The Methodists. There's a Presbytery, I want to say in Kansas, Next Church. Is that what it's called? So there are other studies out there, and if you don't have them, I could send you links to their reports.
Please do. That would be
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
We are connecting with Twin Cities for a conversation to hear about them, just like we're hearing from you. And we're connecting with folks from Lansing, Michigan, with the Justice League
Cool.
that's there. So did Jermaine Ross Allen consult with you all at all?
No, but also a fantastic, right, resource. I'm trying to think. He started his position maybe partway through of our work. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think what Jessica was saying to us too is that you're going to identify possibly 100 problems within your presbytery, which certainly we could see those. And she said, but you just want to try to take a step back and look for the root. What is underlying these problems? Are there root causes that you can point to? You know, and then to, based on that, come with strategic recommendations to disrupt those root causes.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't say yet whether we have done that, but it was a faithful attempt to try to do that.
Any other questions from you all, friends?
So if you could go back and rewind the clock, would you do some things differently?
Good question.
I think that again, the listening that you all are doing in the beginning, I wonder about that. I wonder about, I think that partly why we didn't do that is that Crossroads' approach is sort of a little antithetical to that because they're trying to help you build a case and to have it like be verified. And so they actually specifically encourage us not to talk to people. Um, and I think where there's a lot of mistrust in the presbytery, it's like you do have to be a little careful, whose story are you hearing from? But again, you have this specific focus on these 5 or 6 churches. I think you're in a little different situation. I think so, but I do think that not talking to people was very hard on our team members because I think they really had that desire to do that, and I think we were coached against that. Um, so I'm not sure how we would redo that. Um, I wish it could have been done more quickly, but again, that's my bias is in project management to get things done.
I think you guys did it in a pretty timely manner, personally.
It looks like that now, doesn't it? But every week was long.
I'm sure. And there's always like, I think we all sense and feel like a little bit of the impatience to get there and to feel like the work is being done. But I do appreciate something Jermaine said. Like we do this work, we want to do it as urgently as possible, but for as long as it takes. And so yeah, so there's urgency,
Good.
but we also try to allow ourselves the grace that it takes a long time to read all the Presbytery minutes from 1916 to, I mean,
Yes, it does.
You learn a lot though from the minutes of an organization, don't you? You really do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Just depending on who's the stated clerk, how much information is conveyed or not conveyed. Some are very terse, but the advantage of having heard the stories is some of the background related to if they only have like one sentence or one paragraph, oh, there's a lot more to that we've heard about. And so it's interesting how it gets documented.
Yeah.
Our record keeping has not always been great either in our presbytery, and we found a bunch of boxes at a church that's now not even a Presbyterian church. It's still owned by the presbytery, but it's more of an evangelical church. And there were a lot of really important documents in there that the presbytery had kind of forgotten about, including this an agreement between 2 churches that was one of our case studies that no one could ever find the agreement. Well, we went in there and we found the agreement. And so record keeping has been an issue, and who at times it has been not great for our communities of color that we have not kept great records on certain things. So, and then who are you going to believe, when you're in a dispute? So record keeping is not, we didn't really write about that in the report, but it's not been great. I mean, I think we probably comply with the rules, but there's a lot of files you generate. We own a lot of properties in the Bay Area, a lot of properties.
Yeah, I think we've run into some similar things in terms of like some handshake deals that were, maybe made with the Black church that never got written down and later were kind of just undone or never carried through on. So yeah.
Now, the team members are all going to have, each of us has our own perspective and voice. And so if you want to connect with anyone else on the team, we could maybe put that together. If you work a little more and want to come back and revisit, I know we had several meetings with the Twin Cities. So I'm pretty sure that people would be happy to talk with you, like Rick Leong maybe would be willing to talk to you. Linda Lee was the co-moderator with Rick. So anyway, you just let us know, me know, and I could make that happen for you so you could hear from other voices too.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Linda. Really appreciate the time and all the work you all did. Very faithful work. And I'm sure some good things are gonna be unfolding there in San Francisco Presbytery.
I hope so. And I will send you the links to some of the other reports that we referenced and looked at, just to know that it's possible to finish this, you know. Um, and that was, I think, you know, I guess my parting thought is that, you know, part of, I think, what our presbytery struggles is the lack of belief that we can do this. Um, Coming into it new, especially, I see that is, and the person who kind of was the key staff person, Reverend Inho Kim, he really believed we could. And he
Mhm.
encouraged me, and he just said, we can do this. We can do this work. We can transform our presbytery. And that really kept me going against people who would say, and I thought, well, it's just because I don't have the experience with this presbytery that I'm naive. But you know, you do have to have this belief and the conviction that we can do it, even when it's hard, and hold on to that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for that
Yeah.
encouragement.
Yes,
On to
you
that.
can do it. All righty. Let
All
me know
right.
if you need anything. Take
Will
good care.
do. All right. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah.
Many thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, friends, for being here. I think that was good. That was good to hear from
Yeah.
her. So thanks for